Aloha everybody. Thanks for coming into this talk, which somehow I got selected to present. Actually, I was kind of excited to present about this one. My name is Barboza. I have a native plant nursery called Hui Ku Maoli Ola. We've been in business now for about almost 15 years, and we strictly just sell native and Polynesian introduced plants. But I'll get a little bit into that as we go along with the talk. But one of the reasons why I was excited to sign up for this talk in particular is because we have our native plant nursery, and we've been doing this for some time now. A lot of times people look at us as a source for getting their natives, which is awesome. However, when we don't have the plant that the particular landscaper or homeowner wants, a lot of times the next question is, okay, well, where can I go dig it up? And to me, that's the basis of why I wanted to be a part of this. I thought it was going to be a panel, but talk. And what I'll do is I'll kind of give a brief history of our company and how we kind of came to be and do what we do, and then I'll even talk about how we started off and how we collected stuff in the beginning. And yeah, I guess next slide, please. So I went to Kamehameha School, and one of my best friends, we both grew up in Waimanalo, Matt Sherman. He and I started the company back in 1999. But it was in about 1997, while we were both at UH, that we started to get into native plants. And what's funny is that I went to Kamehameha, but my degree is in zoology. And my business partner went to Punahou, but his degree is in Hawaiian studies. And but we both came to the same liking of native plants, but one from an ecological perspective and another one from a cultural perspective. And we would go hiking a lot, and being that we both grew up in Waimanalo, we had the desire to put native plants in our own yards. And we just thought that, well, it's the nursery capital of Oahu. There's got to be some native plants that we can buy from one of these nurseries. And we literally went to every single nursery in Waimanalo. And we could find naupaka, we could find akia, we could find white hibiscus. We couldn't even find that much pohinahina. Pohinahina we actually grew on our own, and pohinahina is everywhere nowadays, but this is even before pohinahina even became popular. And so we bought whatever we could at whatever nurseries were in Waimanalo, and that's kind of where we started. And then I remember the very first plant that I ever propagated was Willy Willy. And I actually went on a hike in Kamiloiki. My friend lived in Kamiloiki, and we went behind his house and we just went cruising around. There's Willy Willy trees everywhere. And I recognized it from Heidi Bornhorst's book, and collected the seeds, and I had 9 Willy Willy seeds. I planted them, and they all grew, and that was the beginning of our company from my side. My background is in zoology, but I guess I kind of geared towards the ecology of Hawaii. And so anything from in the oceans all the way up into the mountains and how they interact is kind of what I'm interested in. And from the cultural side, we both grew up, and I do have a cultural background as well. Being in Waimanalo, you try and learn about all the different places in Waimanalo and what they represent. And a lot of people may not know, well, most people didn't know before, but now if you've gone driving a lot, you recognize that the ahupua'a of Waimanalo used to extends from, what point is that? I want to say Keone Wailea, but that's my niece is named after that point that separates Ka'ohau or Lanikai area from Waimanalo. Wailea Point. And so that's one extent of the ahupua'a, and it goes all the way around to Kuli'o'o, and which includes Koko Marina, includes Kuapakai, Lunalilo Home Road, all of that area is actually in the Ahupua'a of Waimanalo, up until the year 1800. Only then was after 1800 was it turned into Kona, and then now it's actually a part of Honolulu, I believe. But anyhow, you learn about places within your Ahupua'a, and one of the places is Ihi'ihi Lawakea. And Ihi'ihi Lawakea is a crater that's above Hanauma Bay. And the story behind Ihi'ihi Lawakea is, it's named after a benevolent chiefess who was a great fisherwoman, surfer, everything, everything that I would look for in a girl. And so I remember going to a plant sale at this place called Pat's Island Delights. And Pat's Island Delights was pretty much, he was really into native plants, and he got all these other backyard growers together. We weren't one of them. We were still in our manini phases. And I saw Ihi'ihi Lawakea for sale over there, so I bought that, and I was just so excited. The point of the story is we would acquire all of these plants, and we were on a limited budget. So I wanted one plant, my business partner wanted one plant, but we couldn't afford to buy two plants, so we would buy one plant and then we would learn how to propagate it so that he could have the other plant. And Heidi's book, and I wish she was in this course, or in this talk, because literally we tried to work our way down, or I tried to work my way down through every single plant in Heidi's book. And that's kind of how we got started. Next slide. Today, we've expanded from our nursery to include landscape consulting, landscape contracting, and habitat restoration, which is what I really like. And to kind of feed off of Matt Keir's presentation this morning, when we do landscaping, because my background is in ecology, I always try and do as much as I can with my landscapes to bring back what that landscape of that house area would look like 1,000 years ago. And with that in mind, like I have a rule of thumb when we do landscapes is 75% from that aina and 25% fluff. And the 25% fluff it's still native, it's just not native from that region or from wherever that house is. For example, if we did a restoration in Wailupe, I would try and put back, a'ali'i, I would try and put back a lot of ulei. I haven't planted a willy tree in years, but I would use that format, and then to give splashes of color, I might put in hibiscus kokio subspecies St. Johnianus from Hawaii or something. And then about 6 years ago, we also started a nonprofit called Papahana Ku'ola, and that nonprofit is pretty much dedicated to what we do as a business, but it's the education component to it. And so we apply for various grants that way. But when it comes to plant collecting, our nursery is located in the back of Ha'iku Valley. It's not really in the back, kind of midway up, at the end of Ha'iku Road. And it's not the driest place. It can be at times, but a lot of times it's one of the wettest places. And being that we're in Hawaii, a lot of the biodiversity occurs in the lowland dry forest. And it's hard for us to maintain coastal and lowland dry forest plants at our nursery. So what we do is whenever we do landscapes and whenever we try and recreate these ecosystems at these homes, we use each one of these homes as a bank for our native plants. So we keep a close working relationship with each one of the homeowners that we do landscaping for, so that we always have the opportunity to go back and we'll for the most part do it for free, because we're getting the benefit of the cuttings, they're getting the benefit of trimming back their hedges or trimming back their ground covers. Next. And like I said, when we got into native plants, it wasn't out of this is a money maker. When we started, it wasn't a money maker at all. Only recently, have we been able to expand our service, through the expansion of our services that we're allowed to expand our company. But when we started, for a very long time, it was just me and Matt. And we got into it because we felt that it needed to be done. It was almost shameful that we were in the nursery capital of Oahu, but we couldn't find any native plants. And like I said, we wanted these plants. It started off as a hobby. And I wanted native plants at my parents' house because I was hoping and praying, even though my parents live near the ocean, that maybe a native bird would come to their yard. And that's what was feeding my desire to acquire native plants. And in addition to, doing a few hikes, and getting plants from Pat's Island Delights, we really got the majority of our plants from the Lion Arboretum and Honolulu Foster Botanical Garden sales. And Lion Arboretum sales back in the day, man, if you weren't one of the first 50 people in line, you weren't getting a native plant. And there'd be like 400 people in line trying to all go to the native plant section. So we used to have to get there super early in the morning, strategize what we're gonna do. And our strategy was rush to the native plant table, grab one of everything, don't care about what the other person is getting, just make sure you get one of everything. Then we hui up after, and then we just kind of put back the doubles. And then we buy, because we were broke, we didn't have any money. And we put back whatever the other person had the same thing of, and we went down there and we split the tab right down the middle. And when we did this, the intent was to put the plants in our parents' yards. And for me, that was probably the most important thing that we ever did to start our company, because we would know the trial and errors of how to take care of these plants. And after, and then we would incorporate Heidi's book on how to propagate the plants. And literally that's how we started our company. And so today, this is the reason why we got into it, is to try and address this situation. Nowadays, a lot of people are addressing it, from the green standpoint, which is great, but not necessarily from the ecological standpoint, like how Matt was speaking of earlier. And for us, it's all encompassing. And the name of our company is called Hui Ku Maoli Ola. And Hui Ku Maoli Ola means the organization that stands for native life. It doesn't specifically talk about plants, even though that's what we mainly deal with. We strive to encourage all native forms of life to grow, and including Hawaiian people themselves. And literally what it all funnels down to are the plants. And so that's why we focus our lives on doing that. Next slide. And for those of you who don't know, this is kind of an outdated list. It's from 2008, but this will just give you a range of ideas of the current situation that native plants face. We have approximately 1,500 plants that are native to Hawaii, and already more than 111 of them have gone extinct. 111 species, and so on and so forth. Next slide. And how I mentioned earlier, a large amount of Hawaii's biodiversity occurs in the dry forests. We just don't have enough dry forests left because that's where we all live. However, just because we live there doesn't mean that we can't bring it back. Almost every home, there's 280,000 single-family homes in Hawaii. That's a huge impact that we could make through the landscaping if we were able to put back the right plants in the right areas. We can do that one house at a time, and before you know it, we'll have, the very first house that we've ever landscaped is up in Alewa Heights. And granted, it's pretty high up, but it's not all the way up. And we planted ohia trees that were this big initially. Now they're 30 plus feet tall. And the homeowner regularly gets amakihi, and I didn't believe it at first. And then I had to go there and actually see it. And yeah, he has amakihi at his house. So, next. And we grew up in Hawaii. Growing up, we hear a lot of plants. There's a lot of people that love plants in Hawaii, and Hawaiian people, non-Hawaiian people, just residents. But we grew up with these plants, and a lot of the times we think that all of these plants are Hawaiian, therefore we can't be in an ecological crisis. But really, the point of the matter is, none of these plants are Hawaiian. And I know I'm preaching to the choir to a lot of the people in the room, but for those in the landscape industry that may not be familiar with it, ka'u oranges are just oranges that are grown in ka'u. Next slide. And the list continues. And these ones, all right, I mean, it kind of makes sense, but I already see that I put the one plant name twice already. Stuff like lokilani, which is the island flower of Maui. It's not even a Hawaiian plant. And when I say it's not Hawaiian, I mean it's not native, nor is it even Polynesian introduced. Let's see. Lantern Ilima, it's got Ilima in it, but not all Ilima are native. Next. These ones especially may seem Hawaiian, but really some are extremely bad. For example, on the left-hand side we have Kukuna Okala. Kukuna Okala is the flower. A lot of people know the lei and love the lei, love the flower, but they don't realize that it comes from mangroves. Mangroves aren't native to Hawaii. Mangroves are not only destructive to our Hawaiian fish ponds, but they create an ecology that never existed before in Hawaii. Recently I've been seeing this one plant called Uki Uki Launui. There's no native, or there's no Hawaiian official name for Uki Uki Launui, but yet I see it on pots. Let's see, Pua Keni Keni. Sorry, Pua Keni Keni means 10-cent flowers. You think when back in the day when Hawaiian, if Pua Keni Keni trees existed with our original Hawaiian ancestors, that they would name it Pua Keni Keni? Did they have 10 cents with them? No. Let's see, what else is on there? Kiawe. Kiawe mesquite, introduced plants, one of the worst trees in our lowland dry forest, coastal areas, beyond the thorns. Beyond the fact that, you try to avoid it whenever you see it. It has one of the deepest tap roots. There's evidence that show that some kiawe roots go down over 60 feet. That's why in Kalailoa and Ewa, everything else is dead and brown, but your kiawe trees are still jamming. What else is there? Any other questions on any of these plants? Lawa'e fern? Pakalana, sorry, that's another one. That's not even, it's not native, not Polynesian introduced, not even pakalolo. I know, then I could grow it. Next slide. So the problem with this is that today we have almost 10,000, maybe even more, 10,000 plants that we've introduced into these islands over the last 200 years. We almost have pretty much every single ecological zone found throughout the world that would allow us to grow every single plant from the world here in Hawaii. And really, we're introducing things at a rate way faster than Mother Nature ever would. And these islands, if you go all the way back to the Emperor Seamounts that are subducting under Japan, at one point in time we're all the way down by where Kilauea is today. They date back 70 million years. Who knows how many islands have already subducted under Japan that are way older. So that's how long these islands have been evolving. Next. How much plants? Oh, I talked about this basically. Next slide. So back to our nursery. Over the years, we have about 160 different species of native plants that we propagate at Hui Ku Maoli Ola. And 45 of them are endangered plant species. About there. I gotta go and count again. It might be a little bit less than that. But every single plant that we've ever acquired, a lot of them, I don't even know where their natural population is. I've either purchased these plants from an institute like Lion Arboretum or Pat's Island Delights, even though I question where a lot of the plants came from Pat's Island Delights. Or we were hired as habitat restoration guys to go into places like Kalailoa, where endangered species exist, and we propagate from that. We propagate a certain number of plants. We have excess amount that are left over, and we have them at the nursery. But most of those plants were already on an approved list of plants that I'm not particularly familiar where that original list came from. but I'll dig into that a little bit later. And for the rest of our native plants, like I said, when we first started off, when it was just a hobby, yeah, guaranteed we would go hiking and I would collect seeds, and we would grow seeds, but just a handful at a time. Never once have we ever collected plants from the wild and sold anything commercially. If anything, in the beginning, we've collected plants in the wild and grew them out to plant into our yards. We've never directly collected stuff from the wild, propagated them, and sold them to the commercial market. We've propagated them and installed them into habitat restoration projects because that's the best way to do it. Next. So back to residential landscaping. This particular house is up on Mariners Ridge. And at Mariners Ridge, on his property, there actually were a few native plants. Ulei, A'ali'i, there was Iliahi Aloe. And it was a long-term project, but the reason why it was long-term is because I wanted to collect the material from his property and put it back into his property. And so, and once we did that, like I said earlier, we maintained this relationship with this gentleman, and we regularly get to go back to collect propagules from his yard. Next. This is some of the restoration projects that we've done over the years, and still, every now and then we'll try and, even though we don't have a maintenance contract with any of these jobs, we try and coordinate volunteer days to go back and help, take care of this stuff, and at that time, I'll make arrangements with the landowner or whoever to see if we can get propagules from, or I'll just call them and say, hey, I need this certain plant, can we go and can we collect stuff? Except for Johnson Atoll. We haven't gone back. I've never been there. We grew I think total was about 208,000 plants that got shipped out to Johnson Atoll. But it was mainly a kuli that got shipped out for their turning it back over once they destroyed it. once the Navy destroyed it, they planted a kuli and now it's all good apparently, but no, it's not. We also did a project over at Black Point. The original name of Black Point is Kupiki O. And the intent of that project was to kind of create habitat for wedge-tailed shearwaters called ua'ukani. And when we first got there were 33 birds occupying this one empty lot. And over 2 years, we did it in 2 phases because we only had a 1-month window to go in and do the work that we had to do in between the fledglings left and the adults came back. And so we did it over 2 years, and we first started it, I think, maybe 4 years ago, and I think there's another slide that's going to show it, but they did a count recently, and it was over 200 birds now that frequent the site annually. Next. Oh, but at that site, and I'll talk about it later when I get to that site. This was Waimanalo Stream was a great success project, and the reason why I'm showing these is because these are regional areas where we got the plants from the site, and so whenever we have projects from within that area, this is the sites that we go back to collect from. Except we don't go back to this site today anymore because it's not there anymore. But it was very successful when we did it, when we first did it. And you can see the left-hand side, the top left picture just shows, I wonder if we can should we turn the lights on a little bit, make it a little bit easier to see? Is that this?
That's a slide.
That's a slide?
That's slide.
This one?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. All right. So, yeah, we did this in 2001. You can see that there's really not much of a stream there. You can't even see it, but we cleared this side. And I don't know if you can see this right here, but this is just covered with vines. And we had this project going for at least till 2004. We turned the project back over to the state, I think in 2005 or 2006. We had moved from Waimanalo, our nursery, to Kaneohe, and so we were never able to go and maintain it as much as we could. But it got run over, or it got taken over by weeds and such, but the trees are still there. And there's actually some Wili Wili trees that are still alive that even made it through the gall wasp destruction of Wili Wili trees. And but what's interesting is that the Wili Wili trees that we used on this project actually came from Waimanalo. They didn't even come from around Makapu'u side. There's a few trees in the back of Waimanalo, behind the homestead, that we found when we were hiking back there. And then the alahe'e trees that are used in that project also came from Kalama Valley, which is nearby, right around the corner, still originally in the original ahupua of Waimanalo. Next. This is Kaneohe Marine Base, and this is Clipper Ponds, which is a golf course. These are the water hazards for the golf course, but every hazard actually had all of them, the endangered wetland birds that are found in the state, except for the laysan duck. There was a koloa hybrids, I guess. There was ai'os, the stilts. There was alai ke'oke'o, alai ula, even auku'u. And even during the day, Eva birds would use that site as a watering hole. But the whole site was kind of surrounded by plukia, and there were a few spots of kaluha wetland. There's a few wetland plants in and around there that we were able to propagate from and redistribute throughout all 3 ponds. And for years we used to go back there and collect propagules for other wetland restorations on the windward side, but we haven't been back in a long time. Okay, next. And then the Kalailoa project is where we have different Nio plants that we've collected from in the past, Ahina Hina, or the Hina Hina Eva, and Maya Pilo, that we brought into cultivation from those projects. That's not the right akoko in that picture. But I didn't have a good picture of the Scottsburgii, so I put in the Degnerii. Sorry, Maggie. I don't know, you're like the only person in this room that's gonna, well, I'm sure there's other people that can, but of course you had to be in this room. Next one. Oh, and with this project, we worked with Fish and Wildlife, and Dave Ellis was really nice to my company in the sense that we've done a lot of landscapes in Ewa and Kapolei, and we were allowed to go back and get certain propagules that we put back on our property that we use to propagate from for the rest of the landscapes that we've done in Kapolei. And so it's to me, it feels really good to redistribute those plants that were literally restricted to a tiny, tiny little piece of land that we were able to expand outwards over 14 acres and take those 14 acres and now be able to put them in every home in Kapolei, hopefully. Every year through the Keone Ula Middle School or Elementary, we hand out on Arbor Day, I think it's like 600 plants, and all of those plants come from the Kalailoa gene pool. Next. And this is kind of what it took. And the upper left is what it looked like originally, and then we cleared it. We actually installed irrigation. The installation part of the irrigation, even though it was over a large area, it was the actual putting in the irrigation heads and stuff, that was the easy part. It was actually taking the water line 3/4 of a mile away from a fire hydrant to the site, which was the hard part. Next. That's kind of what it looked like when we turned the project over. And with the project too, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife developed the plant list for that project, but not all of the plants were within the land that they owned. And so I actually got a collection permit from the Department of Transportation because I knew right mauka of that area, if you're going towards Ko'olina, right alongside the highway, there was ma'o, the Hawaiian cotton growing. And so I was able to get a collection permit from the Department of Transportation to go and harvest ma'o seeds for this project. So all of the ma'o plants that we have growing out at Kalailua actually came from right off the highway, more like it's going towards Nanakuli. Next. Oh, this is the wedge-tail shearwater restoration. Next. So I was hoping that I could get Ryan Peralta, but I called him super late and he wasn't around. But even though we do all of this restoration work and we only deal with native plants, we have a preceding title above us, which is commercial nursery. Doesn't matter that we're a native plant nursery, we're just commercial nursery first. And so I've actually done this application once for the collection of lolu seeds that I wanted to start. And that actually led into the development of the Native Plant Initiative that's actually started through Lich over here. And I'll talk a little bit more about that. But the process was actually surprisingly easy. I'm not sure if it was the reputation of the company that allowed it to happen to be so easy, but this one in particular, and the examples that they give, this is the collection for personal collecting in the Forest Reserve, but it's mainly is centered for or geared towards non-native plants, I would imagine. Correct me if I'm wrong, Maggie, but it's kind of broad, and you collect stuff by, like, it's weird, like they gauge it by the 5-gallon bucket or by the amount. Like, for example, if you're collecting bamboo stalks, they measure it by the stalk length or something like that. Yeah. Oh wow, that's cool. That's how it's so. But what was interesting is that when I applied for the Lolu application, this is the form that I was told to fill out through Ryan, and it was like, okay, are you gonna do it by the 5-gallon bucket? I'm like, I only wanted a handful of seeds. I didn't want a 5-gallon bucket worth. So, but I ended up collecting about 25 fruits just to put into the ground and get a stock going through our nonprofit side. And then right after that, we applied through Lich, which is this organization, but within Lich, the Native Plant Initiative. Next slide. And this is kind of, I won't even get into reading it for you, but this is kind of the mission of the Native Plant Initiative through Lich. And what it is it's just trying to get more native plant species and cultivars or varieties into the landscape industry. And I've tried to do this, but I couldn't do it personally as a commercial nursery owner. But communicatively through a group like Lich, they assembled a large team of individuals that represent various backgrounds, various organizations, federal, state, private, that came together and to start developing this list of expanding native plants for the eventual commercial use. So basically we're trying to protect the plants that are out in the wild by collecting a few propagules now, not digging out plants, but collecting seeds, collecting cuttings, and bringing them into the botanical garden setting or a setting that's a little bit more accessible for commercial use. Next. And this was the pilot project that we did. Was the first one that we wanted to do was Prochardia martii, or actually just Prochardias from Oahu. There's 5 recognized species that are found on Oahu, but we wanted to start with Prochardia martii, which is the one that's predominantly found in the Ko'olaus. And we drafted this proposal, and that proposal is what was submitted to Department of Land and Natural Resources. Next. Oh, this is still part of the same protocols, and this is some of the team that is a part of that Native Plant Initiative. The team is actually a lot broader. Like I said, it includes members of Department of Forestry and Wildlife. It includes Fish and Wildlife Services. It includes private enterprises like myself, Department of Transportation, as you can see, Chris is in there, and another private individual, Leland Miano, who's a landscape designer, who's actually giving a talk right now, which I wish I was there. This is when we were on our way to Lulumahu Gulch to go and collect Prochardia martii. It's on the way up to Konohuanui from Peacock Flats area. And next slide. I highly recommend, if you're not a seasoned hiker, I would not recommend going to this site to go and view or collect Prochardia or any other plant. It was interesting. That's me in the red shirt. And then that's us actually on the way out, climbing back out from the gulch. And I was the one that was holding the backpack, and I think I had like 60 pounds of seed in my backpack. Plus I was like the fattest guy, so I was way behind everybody. But it's there's a small population there, but it's extremely dangerous to go to it. But we're able to. The point of us wanting to get from this site was so that we can get a good distribution of Prochardia martii from throughout the range of the ko'olaus, and this was just one of the sites. Next. And that's the close-up of Prochardia martii. In the left is one that's in the wild. On the right-hand side, it's one that's in cultivation at the nursery. Next. And when we're out there, every population that we come across, we fill out, we just use the rare plant field data sheet that is usually used for rare and endangered species, but we've been using that to document each one of the plants within each population that we've collected from. And not only that, every plant is numbered and GPS pointed as well, which is also in the documents. Next. This is just a continuation of that sheet. Application, do we have time left? How much time we got left? I have my watch broke. 20 minutes? 15 minutes, sorry. Okay. Application for the sale of Hawaiian threatened and endangered plants. This is actually it's a great opportunity for Hawaii to get to understand endangered species and the threat that a lot of our plants face. This is an application that I filled out, and if you're not aware, every single native plant that is listed as threatened or endangered, if it's put up for sale, needs to go through this application process. And the process is it's not strenuous on the applicant side, but the state actually has to do a lot of work in order to ensure that the plant species that you're putting down on your list that you're trying to get permits to sell is legit, and that comes in the form of the sources of where the original plant material came from. And what's funny is that I put on there, like on some of my stuff, Pat's Island Delights, and I have no idea who provided the plants. I mean, I know like originally plants were being brought in from Maui through Anna Palomino's nursery on Maui. I think Dennis Kim was a provider, and Pisces Pacifica was definitely a provider, but I didn't know them back then. I didn't know those guys back then. Like I said, we were just the shoppers, and but as far as that's where they came from. And I'm trying to remember which plants that we bought from there that were endangered. And I think we bought Ojai's from there, definitely. Oh, Hibiscus immaculatus. The first time I ever got a Hibiscus Arnatianus subspecies immaculatus was from Pat Island's Delight. And I was so stoked when I saw it because up until then I've only seen pictures of it in Heidi's book. So I actually got to see a live specimen of it, and it was blooming. I was really excited for that one. But if you go to the next slide. So this is where the form comes in as far as the plant species by scientific name, the source of the propagules, whether it be cuttings or seeds, and the number that we propagated to sell. Usually our list is a lot longer. I just crunched it down to fit the screen on the page. But actually, should I go back to the first one? There's something I want to see. There's the prices on there for each tag, and it's currently 4 cents a tag. But I hear that that price is going to go up, which to me is justifiable because there is a lot of work involved. Just my 2 cents is hopefully it's not too high. Thank you. Yes?
So if, when you fill this out, let's say that you, because I drew a lot of pictures for charting,
Mm-hmm.
say, well, I've got for charting a Maoli Ola.
Yeah?
I think it's going to flower. So,
Oh, awesome.
so let's say, okay, I'm going to, I fill out this out so that I can sell seedlings. And then they just say, hey, where'd you get the original tree? Oh.
Yeah.
Then where are you?
So, you know,
It didn't come with the endangered tag.
well, currently, well, the actual, I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, but there's supposed to be a panel of people that actually say that the plant shouldn't be sold, right? And then that there's not necessarily an official list of species that are approved to sell. It has to be disproven why, or it has to be proven why it shouldn't be sold to the public. So,
Actually, I was on that meeting.
okay.
Last meeting was when Carolyn Horn was still with State Box.
Yeah, and so over the last, since we've been in business, it's always been this list. And as long as the plants are on that list, it was okay, pretty much, as long as your sources matched up correctly. So I'm not sure what the process is going to be. I think it's under review now. And yeah, Maggie. Maggie, everybody, say bye. Yay. Dr. Meg. Mm-hmm.
That kind of thing. So we're looking at that to improve it.
Okay, which is good because hopefully it allows for more endangered plants to be sold commercially, and not that we're using the fact that the plant is an endangered species as a marketing ploy or a selling point. There are just some plants that even though they're endangered, it's not necessarily the plant's fault. There's outside reasoning as to why they're so rare, whether it be invasive species or habitat destruction, whatever. But yeah, hopefully we're able to expand from that list. And the point being that I wanted to go through is that there's plants that have been sold that I know are on the endangered species list that don't have that little red tag, and it's just needs to be put out that to be on a fair playing field, that all of those plants need to be run through the process. And we've been doing it long enough that we're happy with the plants that we've been able to sell up until this point. But hopefully we're able to expand on that. Next slide. Oh, this is oh yeah, next slide. Oh, is that it? Oh, that was it. But yeah, if you guys have any questions, please ask Maggie, ask me, or if you guys have any questions, let me know. No, right on. Thank you.